11 women, one unborn child, buried in the desert outside Albuquerque. For years, their disappearances barely made headlines, until a dog walker found a human bone on the West Mesa. What police uncovered next would become one of the largest murder investigations in New Mexico history, and a case that remains unsolved today. On a cold February morning in 2009, a woman was walking her dog along a dusty trail on Albuquerque's West Mesa. The path cut through low desert scrub, where the city's houses begin to thin out and the open desert takes over. At one point, her dog pulled towards something pale sticking out of the ground. From a distance, it looked like the kind of shape you might mistake for a tree root or a buried pipe. But when she stepped closer, she realized it was smooth, rounded, and the wrong size for anything that belonged to a plant. It wasn't part of a tree. It was a human bone. Within days, that single discovery would transform a quiet stretch of desert into one of the largest crime scenes in New Mexico's history. Investigators would uncover the graves of 11 women and an unborn child buried on the edge of Albuquerque. The place locals call the West Mesa is a shelf of desert, rising above Albuquerque's west side. It's where the pavement runs out, where housing tracks give way to open sand, and where for years people dumped rubbish or drove their trucks off-road because nobody was watching too closely. By the early 2000s, developers had begun carving the mesa into neat rectangles for new homes, grading the land and flattening the natural contours that had existed for years. No one realized that bulldozers might be passing just meters above shallow graves already hidden beneath the sand. And no one could have known that the same construction boom bringing families west would eventually push a dog walker across the path of a human bone. When Christine Ross called police about what she had found, officers arrived expecting an isolated discovery. They brought in forensic specialists, cordoned off a small section of the land, and began to dig. Very quickly, it became clear this was not a single body. More bones surfaced. Some were close together. Others lay several meters away, all buried just below the surface of the sand. As teams expanded the search grid, they moved from hand shovels to heavy equipment, carefully peeling back layer after layer of earth. By the time the excavation wound down, investigators had uncovered the remains of 11 women and girls and an unborn child spread across roughly 90 acres near 118th Street Southwest. Investigators believed the burials dated mainly from the early 2000s, years before the dog ever set foot on that trail, which meant the West Mesa had been quietly holding this secret while the rest of Albuquerque went about its business. Most of the women buried there were in their teens, 20s, and early 30s. Police files say that many were living on the edges of the city's economy, dealing with addiction and sometimes turning to sex work to survive. But their families described them very differently. They were daughters, sisters, aunties, and friends. 11 women and an unborn child who never had the chance to be born. City records list them as Monica Candelaria, Victoria Chavez, Cinnamon Elks, Julie Nieto, Doreen Marquez, Veronica Romero, Virginia Cloven, Michelle Valdez and her unborn child, Evelyn Salazar, Jamie Barella, and Silania Edwards. Two of them were just 15 years old, Jamie Barella from Albuquerque and Selania Edwards, a runaway from Oklahoma and the only victim known to have come from out of state. Naming them was the first step in turning a mass of bones in the sand back into people with histories, families, and lives. To identify the women, investigators relied on DNA and dental records, matching the remains from the Mesa against years of missing persons reports. City documents show that DNA was used to confirm the identities of victims such as Jamie Barella, Evelyn Salazar, and Michelle Valdez, while dental records filled in gaps where families and detectives suspected a match. In Michelle's case, examiners also found the remains of her unborn child with her, a detail that remains recorded in official summaries of the case. The medical examiner could not always determine exactly how each woman died. After years buried in the desert, the remains were too badly decomposed. Official reports describe the deaths collectively as homicidal violence. For families who had spent years living with uncertainty, those findings answered some questions, but they also opened an even more painful one. If 11 women had been killed and buried on the Mesa, who put them there? And how long had it been allowed to happen? Between 2003 and 2005, missing persons reports for women from the same small part of Albuquerque kept landing on detectives' desks. The names came from familiar motels, side streets just off Central Avenue, and from phone numbers connected to partners and clients who moved in the same circles. Each disappearance had its own circumstances, but taken together, the list was slowly cutting into one specific corner of the city. Some of the women had gone missing before and later returned. There were periods relatives struggled to keep track of them, and because of that, it wasn't always obvious on the first day that a new disappearance was different from the others. But as the years passed, the numbers of women who did not return kept growing, and gradually the pattern became harder to ignore. One of the clearest examples is the case of Evelyn Salazar and her cousin Jamie. On a spring evening in April 2004, 30-year-old Evelyn left a family gathering with 15-year-old Jamie and set off toward a park near San Mateo and Gibson in southeast Albuquerque. When they didn't come home, relatives reported them missing. Their case joined a list of disappearances from the same part of the city that was steadily getting longer. Their families could not have known that 5 years later, the cousins' remains would be found side by side in the West Mesa mass grave. In the mid-2000s, Albuquerque detective Ida Lopez was responsible for tracking missing women from the same-sex work corridor where many of the West Mesa victims had last been seen. She began keeping a personal list of women who had vanished from that scene, names, dates, faces, because she felt something wasn't right. Years before anyone dug a single shovelful of dirt on the Mesa, Lopez suspected that someone was targeting women from that community. Her list would later become crucial once the bones were found. It helped investigators match unidentified remains to missing persons reports. turning what had once been a scattered series of disappearances into an identifiable group of victims. Families later said they believed the women's circumstances, including addiction, poverty, and sex work, shaped how the system responded. In an interview with the local station KOB, one relative put it simply, "It doesn't matter what they were doing. They were human beings, somebody's daughter and somebody's auntie." By the time the West Mesa graves were uncovered, Lopez's list and those families' warnings had already been in the background for years. The excavation forced the city to confront them directly. Working at such a large open-air site created its own problems. For example, weather, time, and the leveling of the land for housing had already damaged the remains and erased many of the traces the killer might have left behind. Forensic teams used a mix of traditional anthropology and modern DNA testing to identify the women and estimate their time of death as accurately as possible. Most of the burials are believed to have taken place between about 2001 and 2005, the same years when missing persons reports were quietly piling up. Those forensic conclusions answered at least two questions: that the women had been killed by another person, and that the killings had taken place over several years rather than in a single event. What the science could not prove was the name of the person who had driven them out to the Mesa. And that is where detectives had to rely on interviews, criminal histories, and patterns of behavior. Over time, detectives and the FBI have quietly narrowed their focus to a small number of men they describe as potential suspects or persons of interest. One of the names that appears repeatedly in public reporting is Lorenzo Montoya. Montoya lived in a trailer not far from the area where the bodies were eventually found. In December 2006, 3 years before the graves were uncovered, police say he strangled a teenage sex worker inside that trailer. When her boyfriend arrived, he confronted Montoya in the driveway and shot him dead as they tried to leave the property in Montoya's car. Because of his history, the location of his home, and the timing, Montoya has been described in public reporting as a possible suspect in the West Mesa case. However, he died years before the graves were discovered, and he was never charged in connection with the 11 women. Another name that appears in coverage of the investigation is Joseph Blee, a convicted rapist now serving a long sentence in New Mexico. Police have said Blee was known to cruise the same area where many of the victims worked, and that he had prior arrests involving prostitutes. Some accounts say detectives found a plant tag near one of the graves that was linked to a nursery connected to Blee's family, although authorities have never released full details about that lead. No DNA or direct physical evidence tying him to the West Mesa burials has been announced publicly. And like Montoya, he has not been charged in connection with the 11 victims. Till date, investigators have not announced any forensic evidence connecting him directly to the West Mesa graves, and his exact relationship to the case, if any, remains unclear. Both men exist in a kind of limbo in the public story of the investigation. They are central to many theories and important to detectives, but officially still just names on a list of possibilities rather than confirmed answers. For police, the challenge is moving from those possibilities to evidence that can stand up in court. So far, the conditions on the Mesa have made that step extraordinarily difficult. 17 years after Christine Ross found that firstborn, Albuquerque's police still describe the West Mesa murders as an active investigation. The city has worked with the FBI for crime analysis support, and detectives say they continue to follow tips as they come in. Local reports say thousands of tips have been logged over the years, and rewards of up to $100,000 have been offered for information leading to an arrest. Despite that, no one has yet been charged with killing the 11 women or burying them together on the Mesa. Investigators have examined possibilities ranging from a single offender operating in the area to a trafficker who may have been exploiting women within the sex work scene. But every theory runs into the same problem. The crime scene yielded very little evidence beyond the bones themselves. For the families, that lack of resolution means that every anniversary is a reminder not only of what was lost, but of what still has not been answered. Today, the stretch of desert where the graves were found is marked with crosses and a memorial listing each woman by name. Every February, on the anniversary of the discovery, families gather with police to read those names aloud, lay flowers, and remind the city that the story is not finished. In recent years, Albuquerque police have stood alongside the FBI and publicly said that they plan to keep working until this mystery is solved, even as time and development continue to change the landscape around the Mesa. For the families, the hope is simple: that someone who knows something will finally decide to speak, and that the women they loved will not be remembered only as victims found in a mass grave. On paper, this remains an unsolved case. 11 counts of homicide, one unborn child, and a killer or killers who have never been publicly named. Our thoughts are with the families and loved ones of the victims. These were real people whose lives mattered. Thank you for watching Criminal Cadence. Please like, share, and subscribe. Let us know your thoughts in the comments. Stay aware and take care.